Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel and a huge welcome to everyone who's just joining this live stream. I'm so excited to have you all here today. So we're going back to the basics today. And I know what you might be thinking. Wait, didn't we just talk about the US stock market? Didn't we just dive deep into earnings releases and those big fat economic events and how they shake up the entire market? Yes, we absolutely did for the last couple of days or the last couple of weeks. And I loved those discussions with you all. But here's the thing, even though I've got years of investing experience under my belt, I'm a huge believer that sometimes we need to step back and revisit the fundamentals. Fundamentals is really important. Trust me, it's really important. So think of it like this, even professional athletes go back to practicing their basic moves, right? Because that's where all the magic starts. So today, I want to take this journey with you guys. We're going to browse through some amazing free resources together online. And yes, right here during the stream, I want you to discover those tools alongside me because learning together is so much more fun. I don't want to really do that by myself. I want to do it with you guys together. So our first step, Khan Academy. Khan Academy. So give me a second. Now, if you haven't heard of the Khan Academy, it's this incredible non-profit website that's basically like having a world-class education at your fingertips, completely free. So this one, that's it. All right, now we have we have just opened their official website, Khan Academy. They have tons of learning videos on finance and capital markets, and we're going to explore some of their content together. Now, I will be honest with you. I know that finance glossary can feel super overwhelming sometimes, yes, for everybody. And all those terms and definitions can seem boring or even intimidating when you're starting out. But here's why I think it's so crucial we understand these basics. Every single tall building starts with a rock-solid foundation, right? You can't build a skyscraper on shaky ground. The same goes for your investing knowledge. The stronger your foundation, the better equipped you will be to make smart decisions with your money. So let's dive in together and make this fun. Drop your questions in the chat as we go. I want this to be interactive. Let me know your thoughts and your questions, and we will try to figure it out together. All right, everyone. Now, let me walk you through this step by step. I want you to follow along if you can. So first thing first. We're going to search for Khan Academy. We have done that before. We have done that already. Just open your Google Chrome and or whatever browser you're using right now and simply type in Khan Academy. Super easy, right? Khan Academy. KhanAcademy. Now watch this. So previously, as you can see on my screen right now, boom, the first result that pops up is exactly what we want. It's khanacademy.org. That's the official website. Just click on this one, click on that first link, and we're golden. Now, here's where it gets really super friendly. Once you land on Khan Academy's homepage, you will see they make it incredibly easy to get started. I have logged in with my Google account, but I will just let you guys know You will see they make it very easy to get started. You can simply log in using your Google account. No need to create yet another username or password that you will probably forget anyway. Just hit that sign in with Google button and you are practically there. Here's what I love about Khan Academy. They actually care about personalizing your experience. So once you sign in, they will ask you a few quick questions. I have answered that already. So they will ask questions like, what's your level? Are you a beginner, intermediate, or more advanced? Are you a student or an adult learner, like that? And most importantly, what are you interested in learning? Now, this is really cool because Khan Academy isn't just about finance. They've got everything. Math, science, computer programming, art, history, you name it. Now, if you click here, you can choose any topics that you like from here. Click this explore icon. But since our community here is all about the US stock market and finance, that's our passion, right? We are obviously going to choose the finance and capital markets. I have chosen that already. That's our sweet spot. But here's a pro tip for you guys watching. Don't sleep on their economic sections either. If you really want to understand how the stock market works, I highly recommend checking out both macroeconomics and microeconomics when you have time. Understanding the bigger economic picture will make you a much smarter investor. So trust me on this one. So go ahead and make those selections based on what you want to dive into today. But now we're gonna dive into the finance and capital markets. All right, I think enough talk and let's start. Let's start to learn together, and I will bring my notes to here. This is my notes. I have created a class notes on the Google Docs. So as you can see, finance and capital markets, interest and debt, because this is the first one. This is the first section of this course. Finance and capital markets. Under this one, the interest and debt. So instructor, I just simply put the Khan Academy here and their website and the date of today. All right, so let's get started. I will just click it right here. So let's review this together. Unit 1, interest and debt. About this unit, master the fundamentals of interest and its real-life applications. In this comprehensive unit, learn key concepts like simple and compound interest, present value, and the time value of money. Explore topics including APR, payday loans, and credit card mechanism, and understand personal bankruptcy. Whoa, that sounds scary. So continuously compounding interest and financial decision-making tools like the Rule of 72. Sounds exciting, right? Let's start it. Compound interest basics. Let's click on that one. All right. Let's review the about together. learn about the basic of the compound interest with examples of basic compound interest calculations created by this guy. Questions? Okay, they have questions. Okay. So basically, you can put your questions out there, and tips and thanks. Transcript. All right, they have transcript here as well. Okay, now let's get started.
What I want to do in this video is talk a little bit about compounding.
Guys, can you hear can you hear that? If you cannot, just put your question, put it in the chat and let me know. I can adjust the volume.
Compounding interest, and then have a little bit of a discussion of a way to quickly, kind of an approximate way to figure out how quickly something compounds. And then we'll actually see how good of an approximation this really is. So just as a review, let's say I'm running some type of a bank, and I tell you that I am offering 10% interest that compounds annually. Compounds annually. That's usually not the case in a real bank. You would probably compound continuously. But I'm just going to keep it a simple example, compounding annually. There are other videos on compounding continuously. This makes the math a little simpler. And all that means is that, let's say today, you deposit $100 in that bank account. If we wait 1 year, and you just keep that in the bank account, then you'll have your $100. You'll have your $100 plus 10% on your $100 deposit. 10% of 100 is going to be another $10. So after a year, you're going to have $110. $110. You can just say, I added 10% to the 100. And then after 2 years, or a year after that first year, after 2 years, you're going to get 10%, not just on the $100, you're going to get 10% on the $110. So you get 10% on 110 is you're going to get another $11. So 10% on 110 is $11. So you're going to get 110. That was, you can imagine, your deposit entering your second year, and then you get plus 10% on that, not 10% on your initial deposit. That's why we say it compounds. You get interest on the interest from previous years. So 110 plus now $11. So every year the amount of interest we're getting, if we don't withdraw anything, goes up. So now we have $121. And I could just keep doing that. And the general way to figure out how much you have after, let's say, n years is you multiply it. So let's say my original, I'll use a little bit of algebra here. So let's say this is my original deposit, or my principal, however you want to view it. After X years, so after 1 year, you would just multiply it to get to this number right here. You multiply it by 1.1. Actually, let me do it this way. I don't want to be too abstract. So just to get the math here, so to get to this number right here, we just multiplied. That number right there is 100 times 1 plus 10%, or you could say 1.1. Now this number right here is going to be this 110 times 1.1 again. So it's the 100 times 1.1, which was this number right there. And now we're going to multiply that times 1.1 again. And remember, where does the 1.1 come from? 1.1 is the same thing as 100% plus another 10%. Right? That's what we're getting. We have 100% of our original deposit plus another 10%. So we're multiplying by 1.1. Here we're doing that twice. We multiply by 1.1 twice. So after 3 years, how much money do we have? It's going to be, so after 3 years, we're going to have 100 times 1.1 to the third power. After n years, now we're getting a little abstract here, we're going to have 100 times 1.1 to the nth power. And you can imagine this is not easy to calculate. And if this was all the situation where we're dealing with 10%. If we were dealing in a world with, say, let's say it's 7%. So let's say this is a different reality here, where we have 7% compounding annual interest. Then after 1 year, we would have 100 times, instead of 1.1, it would be 100% plus 7%, or 1.07. After, let's go to 3 years. After 3 years, I could do 2 in between. It would be 100 times 1.07 to the third power. 1.07 times itself 3 times. After n years, it would be 1.07 to the nth power. So I think you get the sense here that although the idea is reasonably simple, to actually calculate compounding interest is actually pretty difficult. And even more, let's say I were to ask you, how long does it take to double your money? So if you were to just use this math right here, you'd have to say, gee, I would have to double my money, I would have to start with $100, and I'm going to multiply that times, let's say whatever, let's say it's a 10% interest, 1.1 or 1.10, depending on how you want to view it, to the x is equal to, well, I'm going to double my money, so it's going to have to equal to $200. And I'm going to have to solve for x, and I'm going to have to do some logarithms here. And you can divide both sides by 100. You get 1.1 to the x is equal to 2. I just divided both sides by 100. And then you could take the logarithm of both sides, base 1.1, and you get x. And I'm showing you that this is complicated on purpose. And if any of this is confusing, there's multiple videos on how to solve these. You get x is equal to log base 1.1 of 2. And most of us cannot do this in our head. So although the idea is simple, how long will it take for me to double my money to actually solve it, to get the exact answer, is not an easy thing to do. You can just keep, if you have a simple calculator, you can kind of keep incrementing the number of years until you get a number that's close. But no straightforward way to do it. And this is with 10%. If we're doing it with 9.3%, it just becomes even more difficult. So what I'm going to do in the next video is I'm going to explain something called the rule of 72, which is an approximate way to figure out how long to answer this question. How long does it take to double your, I forgot the most important word. How long does it take to double your money? And we'll see how good of an approximation it is in that next video.
All right. All right, guys. That sounds really complicated, right? Let's talk about the compound interest. We just watched a video together, and I'm going to explain this like you're hearing about it for the very first time, because honestly, this concept is so important, and yet so many people don't really get it. So imagine you have a piggy bank, right? Okay? Imagine that you have a piggy bank, and let's say you put $100 in there. Now, what if I told you that this piggy bank is magical? Every year it gives you extra money. Let's say 10% more of whatever you have inside. So after 1 year, your $100 becomes $110. Very cool, right? You earn $10 just for letting your money sit there. But here's where the magic really happens, and this is the part that blows people's minds. In year two, that magic piggy bank doesn't just give you 10% of your original $100. Excuse me. I mean, your original $100. No. It gives you 10% of the entire $110. That's now in there. So in year 2, you don't just get another $10. You get $11. I really want to make this clear, so let me bring my notes here. All right. So this is my notes, and I'll just type it down. I hope you all can see that clearly. So let's say what I just said. Let me check. Let me think about it. So first one, let's type it down. Compound interest. For example, now just imagine you have a piggy bank, and you put $100 in it, right? And that magic piggy bank is going to give you extra money. Let's say 10% more of whatever you have inside, which is $100, right? So after 1 year, let's say after 1 year, it gives you extra money, and your $100 becomes what? Very exciting. It becomes $110. You have an extra $10. That's really cool, right? And you earn $10 just for letting your money sit there. So here's where the magic really happens, because the next year, the second year, so after 2 years, year 2, that bank, that piggy bank, it doesn't just give you 10% of your original $100. No, it gives you 10% of the entire, let me type it down. That's 10% of the original $100. All right, so that is $110. Okay, in the year 2, guess what? The piggy bank will give you 10%, same 10%, but 10% of the total $110, which is the interest plus the original funds that you have after 1 year. That's $100 plus the $10 extra money you have. So let me just change this real quick. And guess what? How much you get? So you get $11 extra money. So now, which is so that's $11, right? And now how much you have in total? Now you have $121 in total. Let me just make this bold. All right. This is really cool, right? Isn't it? So let's talk about the year 3. How about the year 3? The year 3, the same 10%. Yeah. But not just $100. You get 10% of that whole 121 of the year 2, which is how much? Let me tell you, that is $133.10. Did you see that? Do you see what's happening? Do you see what's happening here? Your money isn't just growing, it's growing faster and faster each year. The money you earn is now earning money too. It's like your money is having babies, and then those baby dollars start having their own babies, right? That's compound interest, guys. So Albert Einstein supposedly called it the eighth wonder of the world. And honestly, I can see why. Your money literally works harder and harder for you over time without you having to do anything extra. This is why starting to invest early is such a game changer. Time is your best friend when it comes to compound interest. Let me type this down. Time is your best friend when it comes to compound interest. The longer you let this magic happen, the more incredible the results become. Pretty amazing, right? So now let's move on. Let's move on to the rule of 72 for compound interest. Now let's watch this second video together. Alright, the rule of 72 for compound interest.
In the last video, we talked a little bit about compounding interest, and our example was interest that compounds annually, not continuously like we would see in a lot of banks. But I really just wanted to let you understand that although the idea is simple, every year you get 10% of the money that you started off with that year, and it's called compounding because the next year you get money not just on your initial deposit, but you also get money or interest on the interest from previous years. That's why it's called compounding interest. And although that idea is pretty simple, we saw that the math can get a little tricky. I mean, if you have a reasonable calculator, you can solve for some of these things if you know how to do it, but it's nearly impossible to actually do it in your head. For example, at the end of the last video, we said, hey, if I have $100 and if I'm compounding at 10% a year, that's where this 1 comes from, how long does it take for me to double my money and end up with this equation? And to solve that equation, most calculators don't have a log base 1.1, and I've shown this in other videos. This, you could also say x is equal to log base 10 of 2 divided by log base 1.1 of 2. This is another way to calculate log base 1.1 of 2. I say this, this should be log base 10 of 1.1. And I say this because most calculators have a log base 10 function. And this are equivalent. And I've proven it in other videos. So in order to say how long does it take to double my money at 10% a year, you'd have to put that in your calculator. And let's try it out. Let's try it out right here. So we're going to have 2, and we're going to take the logarithm of that, which is 0.3, divided by, I'll do open parenthesis here just to be careful, divided by 1.1, and the logarithm of that, let me close the parentheses, is equal to 7.27 years, so roughly 7.3 years. So this is roughly equal to 7.3 years. And as we saw in the last video, this is not necessarily trivial to set up, but even if you understand the math here, it's not easy to do this in your head. It's literally almost impossible to do in your head. So what I want to show you is a rule to approximate this question. How long does it take for you to double your money? And that rule, this is called the rule of 72. Sometimes it's the rule of 70 or the rule of 69, but rule of 72 tends to be the most typical one, especially when you're talking about compounding over set periods of time, maybe not continuous compounding. Continuous compounding, you'll get closer to 69 or 70, but I'll show you what I mean in a second. So to answer that same question, so let's say I have 10% compounding annually, compounding annually, 10% interest compounding annually. Using the rule of 72, I say, how long does it take for me to double my money? I literally take 72. I take 72. That's why it's called the rule of 72. I divide it by the percentage. So the percentage is 10. Its decimal representation is 0.1, but it's 10 per 100, percentage. So 72 divided by 10, and I get 7.2. It was annual, so 7.2 years. If this was 10% compounding monthly, it would be 7.2 months. So I got 7.2 years, which is pretty darn close to what we got by doing all of that fancy math. Similarly, let's say that I'm compounding. Let's do another problem. Let's say I'm compounding 6. Let's say 6% compounding annually. Compounding annually. It's like that. Well, using the rule of 72, I just take 72, divide it by the 6, and I get 6 goes into 72 12 times. So it'll take 12 years for me to double my money if I'm getting 6% on my money compounding annually. Let's see if that works out. So we learned last time the other way to solve this would literally be, we would say x, the answer to this, should be close to log base anything really of 2 divided by, well, this is where we get the doubling our money from. The 2 means 2 times our money, divided by log base of whatever this is, 10 of, in this case, instead of 1.1, it's going to be 1.06. So you can already see it's a little bit more difficult. Get our calculator out. So we have 2 log of that divided by 1.06 log of that is equal to 11.89. So about 11.9. So when you do all the fancy math, we got 11.9. So once again, you see this is a pretty good approximation. And this math is much, much, much simpler than this math. And I think most of us can do this in our head. So this is actually a good way to impress people. And just to get a better sense of how good this number 72 is, what I did is I plotted on a spreadsheet. I said, OK, here's the different interest rates. This is the actual time it would take to double. So I'm actually using this formula right here to figure out the precise amount of time it'll take to double. Let's say this is in years, if we're compounding annually. So if you're at 1%, it'll take you 70 years to double your money. At 25%, it'll only take you a little over 3 years to double your money. So this is the actual. This is the correct. This is the correct. And I'll do this in blue. This is the correct number right here. So this is actual right there. That right there is the actual. And I plotted it here too. If you look at the blue line, that's the actual. So I didn't plot all of them. If you started, I think I started at maybe 4%. So if you look at 4%, it takes you 17.6 years to double your money. So 4%, it takes 17.6 years to double your money. So that's that dot right there on the blue. At 5%, it takes you 14 years to double your money. And so this should also give you an appreciation that every percentage really does matter when you're talking about compounding interest. When it takes 2%, it takes you 35 years to double your money. 1% takes you 70 years. So it takes you double your money twice as fast. So it really is really important, especially if you're thinking about doubling your money or even tripling your money for that matter. Now, in red over here, I said, what does the rule of 72 predict? This is what the rule is. So if you just take 72 and divide it by 1%, you get 72. If you take 72 divided by 4, you get 18. Rule of 72 says it'll take you 18 years to double your money at a 4% interest rate, when the actual answer is 17.7 years. So it's pretty close. So that's what's in red right there. That's what's in red right there. And you can see, so I've plotted it here. The curves are pretty close. For low interest rates, so that's these interest rates over here, the rule of 72 slightly overestimates how long it'll take to double your money. And as you get to higher interest rates, it slightly underestimates how long it'll take you to double your money. And just if you had to think about it, is 72 really the best number? Well, this is kind of what I did if you just take the interest rate and you multiply it by the actual doubling time. And here you get a bunch of numbers. For low interest rates, 69 works good. For very high interest rates, 78 works good. But if you look at this, 72 looks like a pretty good approximation. You can see it took us pretty well all the way from when I graphed here, 4% all the way to 25%, which is most of the interest rates most of us are going to deal with for most of our lives. So hopefully you found that useful. It's a very easy way to figure out how fast it's going to take you to double your money. Let's do one more just for fun. I have a, I don't know, a 4. Well, I already did that. Let's say I have a 9% annual compounding. How long does it take for me to double my money? Well, 72 divided by 9 is equal to 8 years. It'll take me 8 years to double my money. And the actual answer, if this is the approximate answer using the rule of 72, the actual answer, 9%, is 8.04 years. So once again, in our head, we were able to do a very, very, very good approximation.
All right, welcome back, guys. So we just watched the second video, and let's talk about these 72 rules of compounding. All right. So you guys are going to love this. The rule of 72 is like having a crystal ball for your money. Let me bring back my notes. So we're going to talk about the rule of 72. It's this super cool mental math trick that tells you exactly how long it will take for your money to double. Let me type it down. How long it tells you how long it will take for your money to double. Okay, so remember that magical piggy bank we just talked about earlier when we do the introduction of the compound interest? Well, the rule of 72 helps you figure out when you will have twice as much money in that piggy bank. Here's how ridiculous simple it is. Are you ready for this, guys? Let me know in the chat. You just take the number 72 and divide it by whatever interest rate you're getting. That's it. The answer tells you how many years it will take for your money to double. Let me give you some examples that will blow your mind. Let's say, for example, you're earning 80% interest on your money. So I just put it down, 80% interest rate, and you take 72 divided by 8, and you get 9, right? That means in 9 years, your money will literally double. Okay, so your money will double in 9 years. So if you started with 10,000 or 1,000, you'd have 2,000 after 2 years. Or let's say you fund an investment that gives you 12% returns. Now let's say 12% this time. 12%. Oh. 72 divided by 12 equals 6. So let's 72 divided 12 equals 6. So your money doubles every 6 years. Your money doubles every 6 years. That $1,000 becomes $2,000 in 6 years, then $4,000 in 12 years, then $8,000 in 18 years. Can you see how crazy powerful this gets? So let's say previously I would take $100, for example. Now let's use that $100. So you have $100, right? You have $100, and the interest rate 12%. So your money doubles. Like you have $200 every 6 years, and then what? And then it's $400 in 12 years. And then you have $800 in 18 years. Isn't that amazing? But here's the flip side, and this is why I want you to understand the rule. If you're only getting 2% interest in a regular savings account, say if it's just a 2%, what will happen if the interest rate is just a 2%? Like you're saving money in a regular savings account in a bank, like RBC, then 22 divided by 2 equals 36, right? That means it takes 36 years for your money to double. 36 years, guys, that's basically your entire working career. So this is why the rule of 72 is so eye-opening. It shows you instantly why putting your money in low-interest savings accounts isn't going to make you wealthy. No, it doesn't work. And why learning about investing is so incredibly important. Pretty mind-blowing, right? Now you can impress your friends with this cool math trick. Now, speaking of the interest rate, the Fed is going to cut rates. And how will this affect our money in the bank when it comes to compounding? Let's talk about that. So, let me tell you the fun fact. The interest rate is a speed dial for how fast your money doubles. The high interest rate means your money grows fast, doubling happens quickly. So, high interest rate. Money grows fast. Doubling happens quickly. However, low interest rate, what will happen? Money grows slow. We don't want that. Doubling takes much longer. So yes, you always want a higher interest rate when you're the one investing or saving, because that means your money grows faster. But here's a twist: when you're borrowing money, like with credit cards or loans, to buy a car, for your education, for your house, for your home, like a mortgage and a car loan and a student loan, you actually want a low interest rate, because then you don't get trapped by debt compounding against you. Compounding works like fire. It's amazing when it cooks your dinner, but dangerous if it burns down your house. And when we talk about the interest rates, let's connect the dots between the Fed interest rates and our money's popcorn speed. So when the Fed cut interest rates, here's what happens for our bank savings. Fed rate cut and compounding. So when the Fed cuts rates, here's what happens. Banks usually lower the interest rate they pay you on your savings account. Lower rate means slower compounding and your money takes longer to double. We have talked about that, right? Low interest rate if the Fed cut rate, right? And if the Fed cuts and now let's explain this. Let's take an example to explain this. Example with the rule of 72. If your bank was giving you 4% and 72 divided by 4 equals to 18 years to double. If the Fed cuts and now you only get 2%, so 72 divided 2 equals 36 years to double. So your money in the bank grows at a very slow pace. That rates are low. That's why people often start looking for other investments like stocks, bonds, or real estate when the Fed cut rates, because bank savings are not keeping up. That's why all the investors who owns like Tesla or Nvidia, those technology stocks, they celebrate for the rate cut. That's a reason. But there's also a flip side. Say if you have debt, like a loan or mortgage, lower Fed rates usually mean you pay less interest, which is good for you. So in short, saver with money in the bank, Fed cuts means bad news for compounding. But for the borrower with debt, Fed cuts means good news for your wallet. Now, I think we have finished the Unit 1. Let's go back and continue. This is a Unit 1, right? Compound interest basics. Yeah, we have done this part. All right. We have talked about the compound interest basics. Compound interest, we talk about the piggy bank 10% $100 example, and then we talked about the rule of 72, the rule of 72 for compound interest. Now that's just the first session of this unit, not the whole unit 1. Okay, unit 1. Compound. Let me just copy and paste. Guys, be patient with me. I'm so sorry. Just give me a second to organize my notes because I want to learn with you together, and I'm taking some notes for the review. Later, I will review. All right. Now let's go to the section 2, interest basics. Are you ready, guys? Let me know in the chat if you're ready for this new knowledge. All right. We're gonna learn the we're gonna watch these 2 videos together. The first one, introduction to interest, and the second one, compound interest. Let's get started. So introduction to interest. Let's review the about section together. So simple interest is calculated as a percentage of the original amount borrowed, the principal, and remains the same over time. Compound interest, on the other hand, takes into account the accumulated interest as well, meaning that the amount owed grows at a faster rate and the total sum owed will be higher than with simple interest created. Okay. Now let's get started.
Well, now you learn what I think is quite possibly one of the most useful concepts in life, and you might already be familiar with it, but if you're not, this will hopefully keep you from one day filing for bankruptcy. So anyway, I will talk about interest, and then simple versus compound interest. So what's interest? Interest. We all have heard of it, interest rates or interest on your mortgage or, how much interest do I owe on my credit card? So interest, I don't know what the actual formal definition, maybe I should look it up on Wikipedia, but it's essentially rent on money. So it's money that you pay in order to keep money for some period of time. That's probably not the most obvious definition, but let me put it this way. Let's say that I want to borrow $100 from you. So this is now. And let's say that this is 1 year from now. 1 year. And this is you. And this is me. So now you give me $100. And then I have the $100 and a year goes by. And I have $100 here. And if I were to just give you that $100 back, you would have collected no rent. You would have just got your money back. You would have collected no interest. But if you said, Sal, I'm willing to give you $100 now, if you give me, if you give me $110 a year later. So in this situation, how much did I pay you to keep that $100 for a year? Well, I'm paying you $10 more, right? I'm returning the $100. I'm returning the $100, and I'm returning another $10. And so this $10, this extra $10 that I'm returning to you, is essentially the fee that I paid to be able to keep that money and do whatever I wanted with that money and maybe save it, maybe invest it, do whatever, for a year. And that $10 is essentially the interest. And a way that it's often calculated is a percentage of the original amount that I borrowed. And the original amount that I borrowed in fancy banker or finance terminology is just called principal. 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 So in this case, the rent on the money or the interest was $10. And if I wanted to do it as a percentage, I would say 10 over the principal, right, which over 100, which is equal to 10%. So you might have said, hey, Sal, I'm willing to lend you $100 if you pay me 10% interest on it. So 10% of $100 was $10. So after a year, I pay you 100 plus the 10%. And likewise, so for any amount of money, say you're willing to lend me any amount of money for a 10% interest. Well, then if you were to lend me $1,000, then the interest would be 10% of that, which would be $100. So then after a year, I would owe you 1,000 plus 10%, 10% times 1,000, and that's equal to $1,100. Right? I just added a zero to everything. Right? In this case, $100 would be the interest, but it would still be 10%. So let me now make a distinction between simple interest and compound interest. So we just did a fairly simple example where you lent money for me for a year at 10%, right? So let's say that someone were to say that my interest rate that they charge, or the interest rate they charge to other people is, 10% is a good number. 10% per year. And let's say I'm going to borrow the principal that I'm going to borrow from this person. The principal I'm going to borrow is $100. So my question to you, and maybe you want to pause it after I pose it, is how much do I owe in 10 years? How much do I owe in 10 years? So there's really two ways of thinking about it. You could say, okay, in years at time 0. Like if I just borrowed the money and I just paid it back immediately, I would just pay, it'd be $100, right? I'm not going to do that. I'm going to keep it for at least a year. So after a year, just based on the example that we just did, I could add 10% of that amount to the $100, and I would then owe $110. And then after 2 years, I could add another 10% of the original principal, right? So every year I'm just adding $10. So in this case, it would be $120. And in year 3, I would owe $130. Essentially, my rent per year to borrow this $100 is $10, right? Because I'm always taking 10% of the original amount. And after 10 years, because each year I would have had to pay an extra $10 in interest. After 10 years, I would owe $200, right? And that $200 is equal to $100 of principal plus $100 of interest, because I paid $10 a year of interest. And this notion, which I just did here, this is actually called simple interest, which is essentially you take the original amount you borrowed, the interest rate, the fee that you pay every year is the interest rate times that original amount. And you just incrementally pay that every year. But if you think about it, you're actually paying a smaller and smaller percentage of what you owe going into that year. And maybe when I show you compound interest, that'll make sense. So this is one way to interpret 10% interest a year. Another way to interpret it is, okay, so in year 0, right, you still, that's $100 that you're borrowing. Or if they handed the money and said, no, I don't want it, and you just paid it back, you'd owe $100. After a year, you would essentially pay the $100 plus 10% of $100, right, which is $110. So that's 100 plus 10% of 100. Let me switch colors because it's monotonous, right? But I think this makes sense to you. And this is where simple and compound interest starts to diverge. In the last situation, we just kept adding 10% of the original $100. In compound interest now, we don't take 10% of the original amount. We now take 10% of this amount, right? And so what are we doing so now we're going to take the original, we're going to take $110 is going to be our new, you can almost view it as our new principal. It's like this is how much we owe after a year, and then we would re-borrow it, right? So now we're going to $110 plus 10% times 110. right? And that is equal to, you could actually undistribute the 110 out, and that's equal to 110 times 110. You can actually actually 110 times 1.1, right? And so that equals, and actually I could rewrite it this way too. I could rewrite it as 100 times 1.1 squared, and that equals what's $121. And then in year 2, this is my new principal. This is 121. This is my new principal. And now I have to, in year 3, so this is year 2. I'm taking more space, so this is year 2. And now in year 3, I'm going to have to pay the $121 that I owed at the end of year 2, plus 10% times the amount of money I owed going into the year, $121. And so that's the same thing. We could put parentheses around here. So that's the same thing as 1 times 121 plus 0.1 times 121. So that's the same thing as 1.1 times 121. Or another way of viewing it, that's equal to our original principal times 1.1 to the third power. And if you keep doing this, and I encourage you to do it because it'll really give you hands-on sense, at the end of 10 years, we will owe, or you, I forgot who's borrowing from whom, $100 times 1.1 to the 10th power. And what does that equal? Let me get my spreadsheet out. Let me just pick a random cell. So plus 100 times 1.1 to the 10th power. So $259 and some change. $259. So it might seem like a very subtle distinction, but it ends up being a very big difference. When I compounded at 10% for 10 years, for 10 years using compound interest, I owe $259. When I did it using simple interest, I only owed $200. So that $59 was kind of the increment of how much more compound interest cost me. I'm about to run out of time, so I'll do a couple of more examples in the next video, just so you really get a deep understanding of how do you compound interest, how the exponents work, and what really is the difference. I'll see you in the next video.
Alright everyone, thanks for watching this with me, and basically this video just explained what's the interest rate, what's a simple interest rate, and what's a compound interest rate. So let me bring back my Google Notes. Alright. Now let's talk about the interest rate. The interest, because this is literally the foundation of everything we're learning today, and I want to make sure everyone totally get this. Okay, everyone, think of interest like this. Interest is basically the price of money. Alright, interest. Price of money. Just think about it this way, it will be very simple. I know that sounds weird, but stick with me here. Like imagine your friend wants to borrow your bicycle for a week. And you might say, sure, but you owe me a candy bar when you bring it back. That candy bar, that's basically interest. Alright? Let's take an example. Bicycle for a week. Requested by a friend. And then you agreed. And your friend owe you a candy bar. Oh, of course, your bicycle. So, the interest is that candy bar. Got it? Basically, it's an extra little something you get for letting someone else use your stuff. Use your money, use your bicycle, that's the interest. Now, money works the exact way. When you put your money in a bank account, you're basically lending your money to the bank. The bank takes your money and lends it out to other people. Maybe someone buying a house or buying a car or starting a business. And just like with the bicycle, the bank says, thanks for letting us use your money. Here's a little extra money as a thank you. Okay, bank. Like your friend. And interest is that candy bar. And also the money, extra money. For example, let's say you put, let's use $100 as usual, $100 in the bank. All right, and they give you 5% interest rate. Interest per year. That means after 1 year, they will give you an extra $5 just for letting them hold on to your money. So now you have $105 in total. Right? But here's a cool part. It works both ways. When you borrow money, like with a credit card, yeah. Both ways. You borrow from bank. You also need to pay the interest, like credit card or loan. Now you have to pay the interest to whoever lent you the money, probably the bank. So if you borrow $100 at 10% interest, you'd have to pay back $100 plus that extra $10. So in total, it's $110. So just think of interest as rent for money. When someone uses your money, price of money or rent for money. Isn't that simple? When someone uses your money, they pay you rent. When you use someone else's money, you pay them rent. And here's why this is so important for us investors. When we buy stocks or bonds or put money in high yield accounts, we're basically putting our money to work so it can earn us more money through interest and returns. Does that make sense, everyone? I hope it makes sense. Interest is literally how money grows. And in the second part of this video we just watched, it gave a brief introduction of the difference between the simple interest and the compound interest rate. So this is such a great topic. Let's break it down in simple terms. Let me break down the simple interest versus the compound interest. So, simple interest versus the compound interest. Compound interest. All right. We just talk about the interest basics, and let's talk about the simple interest versus a compound interest. Because understanding the difference between those two is like understanding the difference between walking and riding a rocket ship to wealth. So let's start with the simple interest, the slow walker. All right. Simple interest is super straightforward. It's like having a job where you get paid the exact same amount every single day, no matter what. No matter what, you get paid the exact same amount every single day. Let's say you lend your friend $100. Let's use that $100. So simple interest. You just lend your friend $100 and they agree to pay you 10% simple interest every year for 3 years. So 10% simple interest 3 year. Every year. All right. So here's what happens. The year 1. The first year, you get $10. That's 10% of your original $100. And then on the year 2, you get another $10. All right. Still just a 10% of that original $100. And on the year 3, you get another $10. Yep, still just a 10% of the original $100. So after 3 years, you've earned $30 in total. So $30. So your friend will pay you back $130 in total. Very simple, right? And all right, that's why they call it simple interest because it's really simple, right? So now let's talk about the compound interest. All right, compound interest. Now, compound interest is like having a job where you get a raise every single year based on how much you made the year before. Very interesting. Let me repeat that. Based on how much you made the year before. Let me give you the example. Let's use the same scenario. You lend $100 at 10%. For 3 years. Let me just simply copy and paste it here. So you lend $100 at 10% interest for 3 years, but this time it's compound interest. All right, it's not the simple interest. No, it's a compound interest. So for the year 1, don't want to type it again. Let me just copy it and paste. So in the year 1, you earn 10%. So now you have $110. $110 in total. You earn $10. Right? Now in the year 2, you earn 10% of that whole $110. So that's $11 in total. Right? So now you have what? You have $121, right? And then in the year 3, you also earn 10%, but that whole $121 So you have an extra of $20.10. So guess what? How much you have right now? You have $133 in total. Look at that. Instead of earning just $30, right? With the simple interest, you only earn $30 in total. But with the compound interest, how much you have? Tell me in the chat. Or I will just type it for you. Now you have earned $33.10 in total, right? With compound interest. I know that doesn't sound like much, but guys, this is just a tiny example over 3 years. Imagine this over 20 or 30 years with bigger amounts of money. The difference becomes absolutely massive. This is just an example. With simple interest, your money grows in a straight line. With compound interest, your money grows like a snowball rolling down a hill. So, yeah, snowball. It gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, faster and faster. This is why, well, Albert Einstein supposedly said compound interest is the most powerful force in the universe. Your money literally starts making its own money. Mind blowing, yet? Alright, let's time to move on to the next topic, I think. Guys, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Now we're gonna move on to the compound interest. We just watched this video introduction to the interest, and now let's move on to this one. And I will take notes after, all right? Just wanna learn with you guys.
So let's generalize a bit what we learned in the last presentation. Let's say I'm borrowing P dollars. P dollars, that's what I borrow, so that's my initial principal. So that's principal. And the R is equal to the rate, the interest rate that I'm borrowing at. Or we could also write that as 100%, right? And I'm going to borrow it for, I don't know, T years. Let's see if we can come up with equations to figure out how much I'm going to owe at the end of T years using either simple or compound interest. So let's do simple first because that's simpler. So at time 0, so let's make this the time axis, time 0, how much am I going to owe? Well, that's right when I borrow it. So if I paid it back immediately, I would just owe P. Right? At time 1, I owe P plus the interest. Plus, you can kind of view it as rent on that money, and that's R times P. In the previous example, in the previous video, R was 10%, P was 100. So I had to pay $10 to borrow that money for a year, and I had to pay back $110. And this is the same thing as P times 1 plus R, right? Because you could view this as 1P plus RP. And then after 2 years, how much do we owe? Well, every year we just pay another RP. Right? In the previous example, it was another $10. So if this is 10%, every year we just pay 10% of our original principal. So in year 2, we owe P plus RP. That's what we owed in year 1, and then another RP. So that equals P plus 1 plus 2R. And just take the P out, and you get a 1 plus R, so 1 plus 2R. And then in year 3, we'd owe what we owed in year 2. So P plus RP plus RP, and then we just pay another RP, or another, say, if R is 10% or 50% of our original principal, plus RP, and so that equals P times 1 plus 3R. So after t years, how much do we owe? What's our original principal times 1 plus, and it'll be TR. So you can distribute this out because every year we pay PR, and there's going to be T years. And so that's why it makes sense. So if I were to say I'm borrowing, let's see, do some numbers. And you could work it out this way, and I recommend you do. You shouldn't just memorize formulas. If I were to borrow $50 at 15% simple interest for let's say for 20 years, at the end of the 20 years, I would owe $50 times 1 plus the time, 20 times 0.15. Right? And that's equal to $50 times 1 plus, what's 20 times 0.15? That's 3, right? Right. So it's 50 times 4, which is equal to $200, to borrow it for 20 years. So $50 at 15% for 20 years results in a $200 payment at the end. So this was simple interest, and this was the formula for it. Let's see if we can do the same thing with compound interest. Let me erase all of this. That's not how I wanted to erase it. There we go. Okay, so with compound interest, in year 1, it's the same thing really as simple interest, and we saw that in the previous video. I owe P plus, and now the rate times P. And that equals P times 1 plus R. Fair enough. Now this is, year 2 is where compound and simple interest diverge. In simple interest, we would just pay another RP and it becomes 1 plus 2R. In compound interest, this becomes the new principal. Right? So if this is a new principal, we are going to pay 1 plus R times this. Right? Our original principal was P. After 1 year, we paid 1 plus R times the original principal. Right? Times 1 plus R rate. So to go into year 2, we're going to pay what we owed at the end of year 1, which is P times 1 plus R. And then we're going to grow that by R%. So we're going to multiply that again times 1 plus R. Times 1 plus R. And so that equals P times 1 plus R squared. So the way you could think about it, in simple interest, every year we added a PR. Like, you know, in simple interest we added plus PR every year. So if this was, you know, $50 and this is 15%, every year we're adding $3. We're adding, what is that? 50%. We're adding $7.50 in interest, right? Where P is the principal, R is the rate. In compound interest, every year we're multiplying the principal times 1 plus the rate, right? So if we go to year 3, we're going to multiply this times 1 plus R. So year 3 is P times 1 plus R to the third. So year T is going to be principal times 1 plus R to the tth power. And so let's see that same example. This is we owed $200 in this example with simple interest. Let's see what we owe in compound interest. The principal is $50. It's $50. 1 plus, and what's the rate? 0.15. And we're borrowing it for 20 years. So this is equal to 50 times 1.15 to the 20th power. The 20th power, now you can't read that, but let me see what I can do about the 20th power. So let me use my Excel. Let me clear all of this because it just no, actually I need to just use my mouse instead of the pen tool. Let me clear everything. Okay, so let me just pick a random point. So I just want to plus 1.15 to the 20th power, and you can do this with any calculator. 16.37, let's say. So this equals 50 times 16.37. And what's 50 times that? Plus 50 times that? $818. $818. So you now realize that if someone's giving you a loan and they say, oh, yeah, I'll lend you, you need a 20-year loan, I'm going to lend it to you at 15%, it's pretty important to clarify whether they're going to charge you 15% interest at simple interest or compound interest. Because with compound interest, you're going to end up paying, I mean, look at this. Just to borrow $50, you're going to be paying $618 more than if this was simple interest. Unfortunately, in the real world, most of it is compound interest. And not only is it compounding, but they don't even just compound it every year, and they don't even just compound it every 6 months. They actually compound it continuously. And so you should watch the next several videos on continuously compounding interest, and then you'll actually start to learn about the magic of E. Anyway, I'll see y'all in the next video.
Alright, everyone. Wow, this is where things get really exciting, everyone. We're about to see the actual math behind what makes compound interest so incredible, powerful. And don't worry, I'm going to break this down super simply so everyone can follow along. At first, let me bring back my notes. So, here we go. So in this video, in this last video, basically it just talking about the simple interest formula and more than one period simple interest and a compound interest formula and a compounding at different intervals. Okay, so what do these letters even mean? Let's start with that simple interest formula. I'm not pretty sure if you saw that clearly while watching this video, but let me just type it down. All right. Simple formula. This is a simple interest formula. So what do these letters even mean? Let me explain. All right, let me explain. Don't panic, it's really simple. And I will also type it down clearly. So the P, let's start with the P. P means principal. P stands for principal. Don't worry, don't panic. As I just said, it's just a fancy way to say. It's just a fancy way to say the money you start with. Money you start with. All right. So, what's the meaning of the R? Means the interest rate. Interest rate. We have been talking about the interest like a 5% or 10%, but we'll write it as a R. And the 1, what's the meaning of that 1? One, that's your original money, 100% of it. Clear? If you have any questions, just let me know in the chat. So what's the meaning? Oh, I forgot this, sorry. I also need to explain this, I think. What's the meaning of this one? 1 plus R. It means you keep your original money, the one. And also add the interest. Isn't that simple? Very simple, right? When we break it down. Oh no. All right. So let me give you an example. 100. For example, $100 at 10%. And how much is it? Example. $100 at 10%, for example. Let's calculate that together, guys. So how to use this formula to calculate this? So that is 100 multiply the 1 plus what? That 10%, that's 0.1, right? And then that's 110. So if you only do one period, simple and compound interest look the same. Now if you in this video we will also talk about the more than one period simple interest. Let me give you the formula. So this is a formula for one period, simple interest formula. Now this is a one period. All right, now we're gonna talk about the more than one period. I will give you the formula. More than one period. If interest is simple, it never grows on itself. It's just the formula like this. This is a formula. Alrighty. So the n, what's the meaning of that n compared to the formula we just had? Compared to the formula we talked about, compared to this one, we have an extra n, right? What's the meaning of that n? So n means number of periods. That's just another fancy way to say stuff. Number of periods or years. All right. So let's take the same example, 100 at 10%, right? Example 100 at 10%, $100 at 10%. Now it's not for 1 year, no, this is for 3 years now. All right, so how to calculate this one? Use this formula. How to calculate? Try it, guys. Let me know in the chat. So let me show you how to calculate this. $100 principal, and then 1 plus what? Plus the interest, right? The R represents for interest rate, 10%. So we put the 0.10 here, and then And then what? 3 years, isn't it? Okay, so that is 100 multiplies 1.3, right? And that's $130. So you only earn $30 in total because it's always on the first $100. So basically this video just give you all the formula we talked about. We have talked about all this stuff when we talk about the interest basics. Now let me give you the formula of the compound interest. Let's talk about the compound interest formula. Okay, so this is the magic machine. Popcorn magic machine. All right. Now, as we have talked about it, I'm not gonna break it down in details, no. But if you have questions, just leave a comment, all right? Compounding at different intervals. Okay, so here you have it, the formula of the compound interest formula. So, alright everyone, wow, what an incredible live stream we just had together. You know what, I'm so pumped about what we covered today. We went back to those fundamentals. We explored Khan Academy together. We broke down interest in the simplest way possible. Literally the simplest way possible. We talked about that magical rule of 72, right? Remember? The rule of 72, and we even dove into those formulas that show you exactly how your money can multiply over time. I hope you guys can see now why I'm so passionate about financial education. These are not just a boring math concept, these are literally the building blocks of wealth. Understanding the difference between simple and compound interest, knowing how to use the rule of 72, those tools are going to change how you think about your money forever. And remember, this is just the beginning. We started with Khan Academy today, but there's so much more to explore. We will explore it together in our upcoming live stream for sure. Keep learning, keep asking questions, and most importantly, start putting this knowledge into action. I saw so many great questions in my WhatsApp group and in the chat today, and I love how engaged you all were. That's what makes this community so special. We're all here learning together, growing together, right? Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Smash that like button if this helped you understand these concepts better. And ring that notification bell because we're going to keep diving deeper into these topics in our upcoming streams. Drop a comment below and let me know what was your biggest aha moment from today's stream. What do you want to learn about next? Alright guys, until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and remember, every financial expert started exactly where you are right now. You've got this. I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everyone.